Good morning. We welcome you to the WTS Southwest Region Inaugural Winter Webinar, sponsored by LAN. I am Christina Sines of the San Antonio Chapter, WTS, and I would like to thank you for participating in our program, Resiliency in Transportation. Before we jump into the overall program, we would like to take a minute to tell you about our organization. WTS Women's Transportation Seminar was established in 1977 by a group of pioneering women in transportation
who realized that women's careers would benefit from professional development, encouragement, and recognition to support their advancement as transportation professionals. Now, after more than 40 years of growth and development, WTS is an international organization with more than 6,500 members that includes men and women, and 79 chapters. WTS is connected to a network of over 40,000 transportation professionals. Local chapters generate high-caliber professional development and networking opportunities for WTS members across the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. We have a mission to advance the transportation industry and the women in it by providing access to the top leaders in the industry, development and leadership programs, networking and shared knowledge base, mentoring and career centers, annual and technical conferences, along with our scholarship and student chapters. Today's session is brought to you by the Southwest Regional Representative. In slide, we see the breakup of the regions of the United States. The first region that was established was the Central Region in 2013. Then we established the Northwest Region in 2014, the Northeast in 2015, and our region, the Southwest, was the most recent in 2017. The Southern and Pacific regions are still being implemented. Today's presentation is brought to you by the Southwest Region Representatives. From Dallas-Fort Worth is our Regional Council Chair. Lisa Garner from Houston Chapter is our Regional Council Vice Chair. Other committee members include Ashley McLean from the Heart of Texas, which is our Austin area chapter, Shannon Hudson of the Oklahoma chapter, Kristen Hagen from the Baton Rouge chapter, and then myself, Christina Sines from the San Antonio chapter. If you have any questions or comments on the presentation, please feel free to reach out to any one of us. Information on any of the speakers or how our chapter might be able to help you. So let's begin with our first speaker this morning. We are pleased to announce Dr. Shannon Van Zandt as the Professor and Interim Department Head, Landscaping Architecture and Urban Planning, and Youngblood Professor, Central Land Development at Texas A&M University. Scholarship focuses on the intersection of affordable housing with disaster impacts, resilience, and recovery, with a particular interest in how residential land use patterns exacerbate or mitigate exposure to natural hazards, specifically flooding. She has served as a PI or a co-PI on nearly $4 million of external funding from the NSF, the National Institute of Standard and Technology, the Army Corps of Engineers, and others. Dr. Van Zandt is the author of the 2014 book, Planning for Community Resilience, for Reducing Vulnerability to Disasters, along with more than 45 other journal articles, book chapters, and technical reports. In Texas, Dr. Van Zandt serves on the board of Texas Housers, one of the nation's premier advocacy groups for low-income housing, and is an active advocate for housing recovery after hurricanes Ike, Dolly, and now Harvey. We would like to welcome Dr. Van Zandt.
All right, so I'm Shannon Van Zant. Thank you for the kind introduction, and I'm really pleased to be here with the Women in Transportation. It's a group I've been aware of for many years, and this is my first opportunity to talk with you. So I was asked to speak a little bit about the impact of Harvey on the Houston area and try to give you a bit of an overview of the populations that were affected and some things that might be relevant to transportation planning and practice as we experience more and more of these disasters in our large metropolitan areas. So let's see, it's not seeming to let me forward. There we go. All right, so Hurricane Harvey, as many of you will remember, struck the Texas coast at the very end of August last fall. This slide that I'm showing right now gives you an idea of the nature of the impact of the storm, where you can see, first of all, that Harvey came inland at Rockport, which is just north of Corpus Christi. We call that area the coastal bend of Texas. It's a lot of small towns that are tourism and fishing based. There's also a lot of petrochemical industry, obviously in the Gulf, but also a lot of heavy industry all along the coast as the petrochemicals are processed and delivered to other parts of the world. The event that occurred along Rockport was primarily a wind event. I'll show you some pictures a little bit later. It was devastating to the communities of Rockport and Port Aransas, that area. There was a lot of loss of housing. Rockport lost about 40% of their housing to those winds. But what is more striking about the impact of Harvey is what happened when it sat over Houston later that weekend. Houston received upwards of 35 inches of rain, in some areas as much as 50 inches of rain, which is really an unprecedented rainfall event for the United States. I live about 60 miles north of Houston, and we received about 30 inches of rain in my backyard, but thankfully we did not experience much flooding. Here's a photo of what happened along the Rockport area. This shows a mobile home park, and you can get a better sense of the extent of the wind damage. Of course, a lot of the housing along the coastal bend is low-quality housing. There are a lot of mobile homes. There are a lot of older homes, and these neighborhoods were heavily devastated and are still not recovering very quickly. This map shows some of the nature of the flooding all along the Texas coast, and I think it's important to remember that the extent of the damage really extends from that Port Aransas, Rockport area all the way to the eastern border of Texas in Port Arthur and Beaumont. Of course, the area that sticks out is the Houston area, and you can get a very clear understanding of the nature of destruction and the way that the flooding occurred along the different watersheds that run through the Houston metropolitan area. Those little lines that you see in the Houston area give you a good sense of the extent of the different watersheds that are present in Houston. And so a lot of the flooding that occurred was along the bayou systems in Houston and up into streams like Cypress Creek and some of the other creeks that are tributaries into the Houston Ship Channel and ultimately Galveston Bay. Also notice the extent of the red dots. So the darker the dot, the higher the level of destruction. So while there are a lot of the lighter yellow and orange dots, particularly along the coast, many of the dark red dots are inland and into the Houston area, as well as in some of the smaller communities west of the Houston metropolitan area. One of my major interests is in social vulnerability. And of course, a lot of our discussion about disaster impacts has to do with physical vulnerability, where residential land uses put people in harm's way. But it's also important to recognize that those houses are home to households of people. And so when we think about social vulnerability, we want to recognize that there is quite a bit of variation in the ability of different subpopulations to both prepare for, respond to, and ultimately recover from the impacts of a natural hazard. And so what we want to pay attention to is recognizing that these populations are not evenly distributed across populated areas, but they're concentrated in very particular ways. So when I talk about the geography of vulnerability, we're first of all recognizing that people and households vary in their capacity, and that they're not randomly distributed through space. They're concentrated in fairly predictable spatial patterns based on household characteristics. So when we think about things like concentrated poverty and segregation, we recognize that minority populations are often concentrated in low-lying areas. And the term I like to use, or the phrase that I like to use to talk about it is, makes it easy to remember, is that low-income households live in low-quality homes in low-lying areas. And particularly in states like Texas, but not just in states like Texas, you can find those low-lying areas in almost every community and find that it's most often the lower income and minority populations that are living in those areas. So these patterns, these residential patterns and land use patterns within our communities really do exacerbate the exposure to flooding and other hazards, and that they have both short and long-term consequences for these populations. To give you an idea of how people are distributed through the Houston region, this map shows the race and ethnicity patterns in Houston. I sometimes like to call it a circus tent, where you have these wedges of minority populations that are circulating out from the city core. And you can see that within the city of Houston, there are large minority populations, and it's really in the suburbs and on that west side of Houston. We often refer to it as the arrow that comes in from the west along Westheimer Drive, for those of you who know Houston, that is very much white and very affluent. And the black dots give you an idea of the number of structures that were damaged during Hurricane Harvey. And you can see that while there are certainly there is damage taking place in mostly white communities, that a lot of the damage is concentrated in Black and Hispanic communities, along particularly the south side of town, and even down into that, what is the Raised Bayou along the southwest edge of Harris County. This gives you a sense of the income levels, and if you can relate the two maps to one another, you can certainly see that typically the minority populations are associated with lower levels of income. Most of the higher income areas that are shown in the kind of aqua blue color are those that are also white, but that there were a lot of areas that are upper income that were also damaged, but the majority of the damage is taking place in lower income areas. I also, to bring it back to transportation, wanted you all to take a look at this map of transportation dependence. So this is a map of the proportion of households that are without a vehicle, where the darker brown colors are higher proportions of households without a vehicle. And again, you can see that it's highly correlated with those areas that are low income and minority. And please do recognize that for households that do not have access to a vehicle, not only does this affect their ability to evacuate during a storm, but it also affects their ability to recover, where they are very dependent on bus service and the availability of public transportation, whether it's transit or bus, to be able to take care of not only their daily needs, but their recovery needs, which may involve actual rebuilding and some construction. So we do want to recognize those concentrated areas. This is like a read of that other map. Yes, I was trying to do a comparison. I also wanted to bring up, I think, a situation that is somewhat unique to Houston, in that Houston is one of the largest cities in the country that has such a large petrochemical industry, and that means that there is much of Houston that is exposed to toxins. We know that during Hurricane Harvey there were a lot of leaks and there was a lot of damage to some of the petrochemical industry that's located throughout Houston, And this map gives you an idea of where some of those hot spots of toxic risk are. And again, you can see that there's a very close relationship between race, ethnicity, and income, where the toxic areas are much more likely to be non-white and lower income. I wanted to talk a little bit about this relationship between land use and infrastructure. As you can tell from my presentation so far, a lot of my interest is in residential land uses, but of course land use and transportation infrastructure are very closely related, and we see a lot of development along areas where cities and counties have invested heavily in transportation infrastructure. This map shows the floodway of a bayou that comes into the Greens Point area in North Houston. And this is a very low-income area. You can see the amount of development that is located not just in the floodplain, which is shown in the blue shaded areas, but actually in the floodway, which is that dark black hashed area of the map. It's very interesting. This is an area that I've been studying fairly closely, and there are several apartment buildings that include subsidized housing that are located in this area that have really had their propensity for flooding exacerbated by the infrastructure in I-45 and some of the on-ramps and off-ramps that actually function as dams now to keep the water from going where it's supposed to go through the channelized system that runs through Houston. And so these areas have seen very severe flooding each of the last 3 years, where Harvey was just the latest of the flood events to affect these areas. And it makes it very difficult to recover, and they obviously have few places that they can move to because they are living in subsidized housing, and there's very little of that available in Houston, which had a real housing affordability problem even before Hurricane Harvey occurred, and now it really is a crisis. I wanted to mention, too, that there are land use development practices and transportation investment practices that are very closely related to stormwater management. The two photos here show that in some areas, roads are actually used and planned to be used as a way to divert water into the channel systems, but that makes the homes, while they may not have been flooded like you see in the upper picture, it's very difficult to access the homes and to get out or to get in or to be able to move around. In contrast, the photo we see on the lower left is of The Woodlands, Texas, which is out in the suburban area of Houston, and it is an ecologically planned neighborhood that really takes advantage of the topography of the area to carefully locate neighborhoods and residential development so that the water is not affecting the homes themselves. And even here you can see that the roads have been kept protected as well, and that the water is really in unoccupied green areas within the community. And it's a great example of a relatively low-cost way to make homes and development less susceptible to the impacts of flooding. So to end up, I wanted to mention a few implications for transportation planning, which is, as a planner, I think it's really important that land use and transportation investments include an assessment of what areas are at risk from natural disasters. That's not something that's commonly seen in comprehensive plans, but it's something that I really advocate that cities do. Evacuation planning and aid distribution must also include an analysis of social vulnerability factors so that we understand where those populations are located that are going to need additional assistance with evacuation and with also receiving aid subsequent to a disaster. And finally, that an ecological planning approach can reduce impacts on transportation infrastructure and can enhance recovery efforts. So I don't know if we want to take questions now or if we're going to leave them until the end, but I will turn it back over to Christina to take over, if I can figure out how to do it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Van Zandt. I do not currently see any comments in the chat item, so does anybody have anything they'd like to type in there and ask Dr. Van Zandt at the moment? If not, we will go ahead and move forward. Minute to highlight some of the activities that the Houston chapter is working on. On March 22nd, the Houston WTS chapter will have a luncheon with a technology panel. They also have an upcoming workshop on April 10th, and their April luncheon will be a presentation by Councilperson Amanda Edwards. They have an upcoming, their fourth annual golf tournament. And then in May, they have another luncheon titled The Successful Women of Transportation. And there's also the website on the bottom of the screen if you'd like to get some more information on the Houston chapter. The chapter is also referred to as the Heart of Texas chapter. It's Austin and surrounding areas. They are providing a luncheon on the March 21st, which will be an update from the city of Austin. Their April luncheon is based around Capital Metro, and on April 27th, they'll be hosting their 14th annual gala. Next speaker will discuss our regional climate challenges and how they impact transportation. Dawn was named the Director of Capital Programs and joined ODOT's executive staff in February 2016. She previously served as the Oklahoma Department of Transportation's Environmental Programs Division Engineer since 2007, and also the Planning and Research Division Engineer from 2002. Sullivan has been with since 1988 and has worked as a summer engineering student and then an engineering and student engineer at the ODOT Bridge Design Squad at the University of Oklahoma. After graduating with her BS in civil engineering, she joined the engineering training program and served ODOT in various capacities, from construction inspector, noise analyst, to roadway design engineering manager. She's been a licensed professional engineer since 1995. She is married with 4 children and 3 grandchildren. Welcome, Dawn.
I appreciate the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to share Oklahoma DOT's perspective on disaster preparation and recovery. This presentation shares our stories of challenges in the face of, excuse me, I got distracted by the computer. In the face of multiple disasters, both man-made and from extreme weather and other natural hazards, and share some of our focus areas to increase the resilience of our transportation system and help our travelers to rely on that system. So, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, with membership of all 50 state DOTs, help us identify issues and help plan solutions to help all DOTs. They have identified these effects of climate change and extreme weather that will impact the transportation system. So we can expect higher temperatures, rising sea levels, which with hurricane and storm surge, the coastal areas are already experiencing, more intense severe storms, increased precipitation, but also higher risk of drought and wildfires in the west, and of course higher risks of flooding. Other states have conducted projects to infrastructure vulnerability to extreme weather, but only a few DOTs have completed climate adaptation or vulnerability reports or even climate change web pages. I don't think it surprises anyone in the Southwest region that Oklahoma does not have a climate change webpage. The term, unfortunately, has become politically charged, but there is one thing every Oklahoman can agree with, and that is that we are experiencing more frequent and more extreme weather events. A scientist called Climate Central has created a preparedness report card for every state. With a few exceptions, states are reasonably well prepared for current threats, but very few have taken action sufficient to prepare for increasing risks of the future. I guess I'm happy to see that we got a C, which is a passing grade, but honestly, we've had little direct action taken towards climate change. We've always had extreme weathers, so what's new? Well, we are focused on recovery from recent events, and we have to keep up with the new status quo. What we've become accustomed to You'll hear words like unprecedented and new record in this presentation multiple times. Our state maintenance engineer, who recently retired, compiled these events to help me tell quite a story of weather and disaster response in Oklahoma. Arguably one of the most famous Oklahomans, Will Rogers, a stage and motion picture actor, American cowboy, a humorist, and a social commentator from the 1930s, once said, "If you don't like the weather in Oklahoma, wait a minute and it'll change." Here are Oklahoma examples spanning just the last 12 years. In 2006, we had 22 fire management assistant declarations. You know, I don't know if other states have the signs posted that say do not drive into smoke. We have them because we need them. In 2006, a major fire shut down I-35 in the Arbuckle Mountains. The 22 declarations in 2006 was only eclipsed by the year 2011 when we had 25. Here, 2007, August. To quote the National Weather Service, an extraordinary weather event continues to unfold over central Oklahoma as the remnants of Tropical Storm Aaron have intensified, resulting in what amounts to an inland tropical storm. Essentially, the tropical depression regained tropical storm status. Consistent straight-line winds of 50 miles an hour were measured in gusts up to 85. Several areas west of Oklahoma City metro area received more than 10 inches of rain. 6 months later, December 2007, we have a major ice storm over the state's metro areas. Significant freezing rain fell almost 2 days. We had a resulting accumulation of almost an inch of ice on every exposed surface, power lines down, people without power for weeks, and our maintenance forces mobilized for debris removal and, of course, snow and ice, dealing with that off highways and local roads, and costing the state millions of dollars. A year later, we had a record-breaking blizzard. I love this. It's not a major storm. It was a major storm, according to the CBS affiliate here. The record-breaking blizzard dumped 12 inches of snow in Oklahoma City, 14 inches in Tulsa. Tulsa set an all-time record for a 24-hour snow event, a maximum snowfall for a calendar day, and maximum snowball depth. Later that year, Christmas Eve 2009, we had a significant storm. 9 fatalities were attributed to the blizzard, hundreds of injuries. Interstate 35, 40, and 44, as well as numerous roads and highways were shut down during the height of the storm. The National Guard was called in to rescue stranded motorists, and hundreds of people spent Christmas Eve night in one of the numerous emergency shelters set up across the area. Abandoned vehicles littered the interstates and highways for days after the blizzard, and our maintenance forces worked around the clock to open highways and assist stranded travelers. June 14, 2010, a record rainfall event for Oklahoma City, for the most in one day with 7.6 inches of rain. It caused I-35 to be overtopped northeast of Oklahoma City, and high water elevation was measured 2 feet above the calculated 500-year storm high water elevation. Well, over 6 months later, we were prepared for a major winter storm and strategically placed materials, but it brought record-breaking cold temperatures and heavy snowfall. An Oklahoma record for 24-hour snowfall was set in Spavanoff with 27 inches of snowfall. We had an extreme cold record of minus 31 degrees Fahrenheit minimum temperature set for Nowata, Oklahoma, and the entire state was affected with maintenance forces deployed statewide to address the snowpack. Of course, 2011 hits, and we have the 2011 summer state experienced, that summer the state experienced the hottest summer on record. More than 63 days of temperatures over 100 degrees, and this was the beginning of the latest drought cycle. We broke 2011's record. It became the hottest year on record. The drought continued. But we also still had intense storms, even with the drought. Ice storms from previous years, extended drought caused basically vegetation to be damaged and ended up in flash flood events down into our rivers and streams and threatened our infrastructure and our bridges. So even though we have these droughts, we still had to deal with these record rainfalls. And unfortunately, May 20th, 2013, Moore, Oklahoma experienced an EF5 tornado. This was on the ground for 50 minutes, damaging or destroying more than 13,000 homes and killing 24 people, including 7 children who had taken shelter in their school. Looking back at the emergency response, the magazine Firehouse, a publication focused on firefighter education and leadership, said, "In an incredible feat of incident management, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and Oklahoma City and Moore Emergency Public Works task forces quickly cleared giant pieces of roofs, walls, and trees from all highways and roads in the affected area. The efforts of rapidly deployed public works task forces made up of road graders, dozers, and dump trucks let major highways in the damaged area reopen within 6 hours of the incident. One of those major highways was I-35. Unfortunately, this more extreme weather means Oklahoma has experienced 4 EF4 to EF5 tornadoes since May 3rd, 1999, which struck Moore. 2011 experienced Chickasha and Newcastle. This tornado in Moore again in 2013, and then 11 days after this, El Reno was also struck. So ODOT is well versed in assisting with emergency response and debris removal post-tornado outbreak. So we still have a drought in 2014 until the 2015 Oklahoma floods. So May 2015, Oklahoma received an average of 14.44 inches of rain, making it the single wettest month on record. So this is just one example. We had State Highway 99 bridge south of Tishomingo was underwater. It was closed May 10th, 2015. It would not reopen for over a year. It received substantial damage. We reconstructed this bridge and opened it about a year later. It was raised 8 feet higher to withstand the record high floodwaters of the Ouachita River. There was a masonry, WPA masonry structure that was constructed in the 1930s. It was structurally sound but destroyed by flash flooding in the same event. 35 experienced flooding up and down. Significantly, we had basically minimum low beam elevation was exceeded on the Caddo Creek bridges. There you have side with the Red River. You're looking at Texas. The Red River experienced more than 17 feet over flood stage. And then, of course, the very next month. Oh, sorry. It's speeding back up. The very next month, June 2015, remnants of Tropical Storm Bill dumped 10 inches of rain, contributing to a rockfall on I-35 through the Arbuckle Mountains in southern Oklahoma that shut down northbound I-35 for several days, and it was reduced to 2 lanes for a period of 6 weeks, causing a 3-hour drive from Dallas to Oklahoma City to turn into a 5- or 6-hour ordeal. Fortunately, Oklahoma leads the nation in major disaster declarations since 2006. If you go back to the 1950s, we're 3rd behind the much larger states of Texas and California. Natural events and hazards can't be controlled by our DOT, but we have these following strategies that we're using to reduce our risk. We are focused our capital investment in improving our structurally deficient bridges. We know that they are the most vulnerable portions of our infrastructure during these extreme rain events, and flooding events. We're reducing our risk through routine maintenance expenditure, like focusing efforts to address scoured structures before they're damaged beyond use. We're improving our traveler information systems for incident management and emergencies, and we're pre-positioning materials around the state in advance of snow and ice events. So our risk reduction that's proactive, the structurally deficient bridges on our system has been a ODOT for many years. In 4, we were 2nd in the nation in number of structurally deficient bridges. In 2010, Governor Fallin announced a program to reduce our structurally deficient bridges to less than 1% by the year 2020, and we are on our way to achieving that goal. Our 2016 structurally deficient number was 251 bridges, and we anticipate 2017 to be 194. The red numbers on this chart indicate how many were due to scour issues, for example, in 2010. What we discovered was during the routine inspection and bridge rating process, we would find additional bridges becoming almost structurally deficient due to scour. So we began routinely addressing scour issues with our maintenance forces to prevent those bridges from becoming structurally deficient and resulting in a more resilient bridge inventory. I have a few examples of those types of maintenance forces corrections. In this instance, the bridge had rotten wooden pile piers, and they were encased in reinforced concrete to make the bridge stronger and more resistant to scour. Our maintenance forces are nothing if not creative and resourceful. You'll notice here that we've extended the wing wall where we had some scour problems, and that is actually a concrete median barrier repurposed. And yes, that in fact is guardrail used as sheet piling. So they'll use anything they can to do their job. They do a great job with what they have. Similarly, we had an undermined abutment and approach slab here. Maintenance forces formed it up, reinforced it so to withstand the next intense rainfall event. MAP 21 was our transportation authorization bill, previous to the one we're currently under, but it required that each state develop a risk-based transportation asset management plan. Risks, including climate and weather-related issues, must be addressed. So here we go. I mean, this is just the last 12 years we've experienced all of these events. What else, right? Well, the Federal Highway Administration prepared this graphic to demonstrate the type of risks to examine during your transportation asset management plan. Today, I'm focused on the hazard risks, but barge strikes are mentioned, and we've experienced that. In Memorial Day weekend 2002, we had a barge actually knock down 580 feet of the I-40 bridge over the Arkansas River, and we had to replace that and get it reopened to traffic, and it was only 64 days. So how about seismic events? Well, if you haven't heard already, we are experiencing induced seismicity due to oil and gas wastewater injection. March 29, 2016, the lead story for CBS News was that Oklahoma had overtaken California as the nation's earthquake capital, with the release of a USGS survey report that found that Oklahoma had a 1 in 8 chance of damaging earthquakes in 2016, surpassing California as the state with the highest probability. 5 months later, September 3rd, 2016, the Pawnee earthquake struck. It was a magnitude 5.8, highest on record, overtaking the previous record of 2011 Prague earthquake at a 5.7. So ODOT commissioned an earthquake response plan and software called ShakeCast Oklahoma to focus and target earthquake response to the most vulnerable bridges based on structural condition, structural design, and actual measured ground motion. We provided training for our maintenance and our bridge inspectors following a seismic event to manage our risk, and now we have a systematic, scientific-based way to determine our most at-risk bridges to inspect post-earthquake and to be as effective as possible to manage the risk to the public. All this closure is due to flooding or the multiple disasters we experience. It's critical that we clearly communicate to our traveling public. So we are increasing the number of dynamic message signs and cameras, our traffic management center, and using innovative technology. So our travel information system, the public can see live updates of roadway conditions, flood damage or road closures, and incident-related closures at okroads.org. Information from the system is populated by ODOT maintenance superintendents and Oklahoma Highway Patrol troopers in the field using cell phones, tablets, and PCs. We're also innovating with a new snowplow tracking pilot project that will make web-based viewing of plow locations along with snapshot photos of roadway conditions available to the managers at ODOT and eventually the public. Each truck is outfitted with a computer tablet and components that work as a maintenance activity tracking system. The tablet takes a picture every 10 minutes and allows managers to see the road conditions. It also collects GPS locations, speed, plow position, and rate of material application by the spreaders. The cost of the system is only about $1,300 per vehicle. We have 99 installed and anticipate 500 trucks in total will be outfitted with the system. The public will be able to see the point of view road conditions on the traveler information site. So this is the web interface that we can see. You see where the plow's been, and you can click on the camera and see the actual condition at that moment. So we're focusing on roadside weather information systems. We have 4 stations online now and letting a project in April to additionally deploy 10 locations along I-35 It's going to include prediction forecasting software. The data collected will include bridge deck temperatures, road surface temperatures, subsurface and air temperatures, and wind speed. Web cameras will also be aimed at traffic flows. Storm events that we've had, we also have been focusing on pre-positioning materials to enhance our snow and ice fighting capabilities. After some of those events, we experienced shortages in salt, and ODOT commissioned a super shed at the port of Catoosa, which is along the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River navigation system, to enhance our emergency supply. That SUV is sitting on 2 stories of salt in this picture. Added 17 new satellite salt sheds in the last 3 years and increased the storage capacity by 14,000 tons. So many are placed at remote locations to improve our efficiency. For example, this one is located on I-35 at mile marker 3 miles north of the Texas state line. It was a 60-mile round trip to Ardmore to refill our trucks whenever addressing salt, snow and ice on the south end of I-35. So this is much more efficient and improves the conditions for the traveling public. Again, folks to thrive with the challenges that we're facing, these both man-made and climate-related. I'm proud of our maintenance forces and our designers and all the folks at ODOT who strive to overcome what unfortunately looks to be the new normal. And thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Let's see here. It looks like we do have a question. How have budget cuts affected your efforts? Is the first question.
Only we've had to take cuts in our capital budget. We have continued to be focused on structurally deficient bridges, but it has caused us to delay other projects, and we actually had to slide 40 projects out of our 8-year work plan last year because we experienced a reduction of nearly $840 million out of our capital program since 2010.
Gotcha. So you're going to work with what you've got when you got it, huh?
Exactly.
Okay. Were there any other questions out there? Oh, let's see. We have another one that says, how long has it been since western Oklahoma received rain?
That's a good question. You know, what's happening is they'll get the rain, but we get it all at once, and then, of course, it doesn't soak in and address the drought situation. So I would have to look at the Oklahoma Climate Survey probably to get that data. Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Is there anybody else out there with any additional questions? You've got Dawn's information here on the screen, so you're welcome to reach out to her directly. If we have Dr. Van Zandt on the line, I'd love to go back. We did actually have a couple of questions that popped up for her earlier. And
sure, I'm here.
You're here? Okay. We are doing well on our time, so I thought we'd go ahead and squeeze those in now. The question was, can you speak to that Houston has no zoning, how it helped or how it hurt during the Harvey event?
That's a good question. I think, you know, in a lot of ways, the lack of zoning in Houston makes it very difficult to do comprehensive land use planning in a way that would allow the city to avoid putting people in harm's way. I mean, it's a common misconception that we don't construct things in the floodplain. We do routinely, and especially without zoning, it can be difficult to control that. On the other hand, you know, I think that the lack of zoning in Houston has led to a much greater diversity of land uses, and that can be positive. I don't think it's always positive, but I think Houston's diversity, not only its racial and ethnic diversity, but its diversity of land uses and activity areas is not wholly unrelated to its lack of zoning. And so I do think that it can be helpful in some cases, but in terms of really planning to avoid flooding, zoning would be a very useful tool to have.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answered the question, or it looks like it was both of those.
things and the pros and cons of it. Okay, it looks like that was the last question that we've received so far. So I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead. And we're going to look at a couple of real quick highlights of the Oklahoma chapter. The Oklahoma WTS chapter has basically a highlight here of the entire year's activities. They've got their April 12th gala coming up. Their keynote speaker is Tim Gatz. There's more information coming, but that's an evening event. They also have a May 9th Tulsa lunch meeting. If we could, we're muted. Any of the other listeners might be muted. That helps the presentation go a little bit smoother. And then Oklahoma has another June afternoon tour in OKC. And DFW, they've got a March luncheon coming up called Hello, My Name is Alien Unicorn. And then they also have some workshops coming up, and then their April 20th annual awards and fundraising Superheroes Ball. I hope I get to see some pictures from that. That sounds fun. And if we didn't have any other questions pop up, go ahead and move forward. Our next speaker brings in many of the fine details of our lessons learned during the Hurricane Harvey event. Amanda Warden is a professional transportation engineer for TxDOT San Antonio District Maintenance Office. Amanda began her career at TxDOT in 2006 as an engineering assistant in the San Antonio District Central Office. Throughout her career, she has gained valuable experience working on advanced planning, central design, construction, district maintenance, structure design, traffic operations, and assisting in emergency operations, and that has helped develop her into a well-rounded engineer. As a native of Corpus Christi, Texas, Amanda earned her bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Texas at San Antonio in 2005, and she received her professional engineer's license in 2010. Amanda enjoys spending time with her family, nature, and serving in her church. Welcome, Amanda Warden.
Christina, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to present to y'all today. So with that being said, my presentation is Hurricane Harvey and the Lessons Learned. But to give you a brief overview, the table of contents, we're going to be looking at a few maps, going over the background, talking about our impacted districts, and then going into the actual lessons learned from the staging district perspective, lessons learned from the TxDOT Emergency Operations Center perspective, and also lessons learned from the district perspective. And then we'll conclude and have questions. People listening from several different states, so I kind of wanted to start by giving you some facts about the Texas transportation system. TxDOT maintains 80,423 centerline miles, and that's miles traveled one-way direction regardless of the number of lanes in a roadway. The average daily vehicle miles traveled is 515.9 million miles, and that's only on the state-maintained highway. But on all roadways in the state, the average daily vehicle miles traveled is 707.2 million miles. Annual vehicle miles traveled is 188.4 billion miles on state-maintained highways and 258.3 billion miles on all roadways in the state of Texas. 26% of roadways in Texas are state-maintained, but 73% of all vehicle miles traveled occur on state-maintained highways. It actually shows the state of Texas, but it shows all the breakdown of our districts. So when you see the clusters of different colors, that's the breakdown of our districts. We actually have 25 different districts within the state, and I highlighted in green, if you'll see along the coastline, that's actually one of our impacted districts, and all the way up the coastline in blue as well. So green represents wind impact, and blue represents impact due to flooding. So the background on Hurricane Harvey was a very unique storm. It rapidly intensified from a tropical storm to a major hurricane in a matter of 40 hours. TxDOT has a hurricane response and reentry plan, and each district has certain responsibilities based on the plan in the impacted district. So keeping with the incident command system, TxDOT's response is scalable. So the amount of personnel and equipment needed depends on the nature and size of the weather incident. We started at a level 1 response and we ended at a level 3 response. So Hurricane Harvey made landfall on August 25th, 2018 in Rockport, Texas as a Category 4. So TxDOT, we braced for a coastal impact to the Corpus Christi as a Corpus Christi impact district initially. So we had staging districts in both San Antonio and in Bryan. The storm ended up intensifying. If you look down under responding districts, you'll see a line. So we actually had like Laredo, Austin, Fort Worth, Odessa, Lubbock, Dallas, Brownwood, Waco, Lufkin, Lubbock, Fort Worth, and Wichita Falls. Those were the initial responding districts. But as that storm intensified, we dropped to the next bar down and we included San Angelo, El Paso, Tyler, and Childress, and then we dropped again and included Abilene, Amarillo, Dallas, Paris, Amarillo, and Atlanta, and then we ended up having all 25 districts respond. But as the storm stalled, we also ended up having impacts to other districts such as Yoakum, Houston, and Beaumont. And I'm ready to advance to the next slide. The district was impacted by damage from high winds, and if you can see in the two pictures show the extent of some of that wind damage. To some fast facts about this district, there's a little over 500,000 population, and if you press the space bar, it'll populate. The area square miles, it covers an area of almost 8,000 square miles and 7,200 lane miles. There's almost 13.5 million daily vehicle miles traveled in the Corpus Christi district, and there's over 500,000 registered vehicles. The Corpus Christi district covers 10 counties, and those 10 counties can be seen on the map on the lower right-hand side of the screen. The Beaumont district was another district that we had that was impacted. It was impacted by tremendous flooding. The two pictures you can see are actually IH, and I believe the first one is near the Chambers-Jefferson County line, and the bottom one is the main lanes of IH-10 near Orange County. Some fast facts about the Beaumont district: they cover a population of over 500,000 people and over 6,500 square miles. The lane miles, they have almost 6,000 lane miles, and the daily vehicle miles is almost 15 million traveled. They have over 500,000 registered vehicles, and the Beaumont district covers 8 counties, and those counties are noted in the map below. Next slide, please. The Yoakum district was also impacted by tremendous flooding, and you can see by these 3 pictures, that's the extent of some of the flooding that they underwent there. Some fast facts about the Yoakum district: the population they cover is just under 350,000 people. They have almost 10,000 square miles of an area they cover. They have almost 8,200 lane miles in that district, and they have almost 15 million vehicle miles traveled. They have over 400,000 registered vehicles, and the Yoakum district covers 11 counties, and those counties are also noted on the map below. Next slide, please. The district was impacted by tremendous flooding. First picture that you see on the top, that's actually a view. You can see the Houston skyline in the distance, and you can see the impact to our system that the flooding waters actually did have. And then the bottom picture, that's a picture of our crews, and that's actually an aqua dam that they used, and that helped prevent, or it kept some water out and allowed us to pump water from the roadways we were trying to get back open. But some fast facts about the Houston district: the population the Houston district encompasses is 5.8 million people. It encompasses an area of almost 6,000 square miles, over 10,500 lane miles, and it has over 81 million daily vehicle miles traveled. There are over 5.2 million registered vehicles, And the Houston district encompasses 6 counties, and those counties can also be seen on the map below. Talk a little bit about the lessons learned in the San Antonio district, because we were actually one of the staging areas. So one of the things that we learned was staging area here in town in San Antonio, but we also staged deployed personnel one night in Kerrville to reduce the drive time. We had crews that were being deployed from as far away as Amarillo, Lubbock, Odessa, and El Paso. And although it worked for larger deployments, although it worked in this instance, we realized for larger deployments and potential base camp setups for in the future, there's insufficient room. So that the takeaway from this, or one of the lessons we learned, was to make sure that the base camps or staging areas are adequately sized and that they can safely accommodate personnel, equipment, and resources. The next area we're going to discuss is checking in and checking out. Overall check-in procedures were good, but there's always some room for improvement. We had several different formats of information that were sent by our responding or supporting districts. We had per equipment lists that were submitted by responding and supporting districts that might have been inaccurate or not updated at times. And we also had individual crew members filing in the check-in desk instead of a single supervisor. So some of the takeaways were we needed to have a standard format for every district to use to make sure that the districts provided update information in regards to the equipment and the employees. Also wanted to make sure that we had a supervisor or crew leader check in the whole crew instead of having each individual check in. When it comes to the response crews were dispatched to staging areas a little early. We had some arrive in San Antonio on Thursday, August 24th, and they didn't leave until Sunday, August 27th. But I want you to keep in mind when it comes to the response crews and the stay at the staging area, it's very unique, and each incident, is unique in its own way. So that's something that can definitely change. But one of the takeaways we had is I think it would be preferable to try to limit the stay for the response or our deployed personnel to one night if at all possible. Slide, please. Thank you. So also in regards to response crews, we had response crews that showed up missing items, and items that were missing were like PPE, paperwork, badges, or DART cards. But I'll give you an example of some of the supplies that the staging area had to provide employees because they were missing that. Steel-toed rubber boots, chainsaw chaps, rain suits, reflective night pants, clear and tinted safety glasses, insect repellent, sunscreen, Nitrex gloves. Some employees did not have their badges, their ID badges, and they could not enter the TxDOT building, so they had to get issued a badge at the staging area, and the badges were also needed for entering the impact areas. Some personnel did not have the reentry forms, so these had to be recreated or created at the staging area. So the takeaway from this is to make sure that response districts verify the items of their crews before they ever leave to depart towards the staging district. Another area we're going to look at or discuss is lodging and meals. So it was determined early to lodge, to lodge employees in hotels near the Bear Metro area office. Later, this kind of posed a concern because our crews were occupying rooms that potential evacuees might need. So we decided, or it was discussed, that a base camp would be a better option, and it would open up more of the hotel rooms for the evacuees. We also had an issue because some DART cards were not activated, and what a DART card is it's like in a way, it's kind of like a credit card, but it's got a certain amount of money on that card that the crews and employees can use to actually purchase their meals with. So we had some issues with some of them not being activated prior to them leaving, or when they were en route, they weren't able to use them. But employees were on their own for food at restaurants with the DART cards. A breakfast and boxed lunch was provided to crews that deployed on Sunday, but no other time. So I'm ready to proceed to the next slide, please. So now we're going to talk about lessons learned from the TxDOT Emergency Operations Center, and this is actually our EOC up in Austin. So with the large amount of resource requests that came through, they identified a need for resource assignment and tracking system, and that would be to help track the resources and the requests because there's such a large number of requests, and that system would help improve that process. Improved communication channels. A lot of times information was passed down from the EOC to like the staging districts through conference calls. But, and there might have been other methods too, but they want to improve communication channels through email and instant messenger / chat functions. They also want to look at updating the hurricane response and reentry plan to be more specific in regards to the responding crews and make sure people understand the crew types and the equipment types that are needed, and that goes back to the geographic region and the type of event. Learned from the TxDOT Emergency Operations Center was that we need to have a standardized situation report, because when you have all these different districts coming in and reporting, every district kind of does stuff a little different. So by standardizing that, that would just make sure that we're all kind of reporting the same information that's needed in the same format. Next slide, please. Identify that there's a need for a check-in and check-out system, and that's to help with all the personnel that we actually had that were, excuse me, checking in and checking out. A better feel for that and better numbers. We also wanted to revisit the NIMS training, which a lot of our district employees have had, but they wanted to make sure and emphasis the division employees had also had that NIMS training, and that goes back to the incident command system. Look at the lessons learned from the district perspective, and this is all districts, so it could be responding districts and it could be districts that might end up being impact districts at one time. But regardless of what district you're in, facility related, you want to ensure that you have an adequate size for your staging areas and base camps, and that you can safely accommodate personnel, equipment, and resources. You also affirm that you have adequate generators at all facilities, and make sure that you have IT support available at staging areas and base camps. We ran into some small issues and we didn't necessarily have IT there at sometimes to help. When it comes to the crew communications, radio interoperability and radio user training was an area we identified for improvement of crews. So that way our crews could coordinate and communicate with each other better, but that was an area we had identified for improvement. And also to clarify the PPE needs, because we're very big on safety first, but just to make sure everybody understands what is needed for each type of crew and to make sure that they have it before they leave. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is one of my favorite things. This is actually what we call the drivetexas.org, and it's an interactive website that you can go to, and this proved to be a very valuable resource. We had more than 500 state road closures during the height of Hurricane Harvey. drivetexas.org website was visited more than 5 million times. We've always been proud of it, but never relied on it more than we did following Harvey. And what it is this system, we have our employees that are boots on the ground checking the status of the roadways and stuff. They actually take that information, and that information gets input into the system, and you get an update. So anybody can log on to that site, drivetexas.org, and you can check the status of the roads. On the right-hand side, you can check closures due to construction, damage, flood, and it'll show that. So what I don't have on here is you're able to, when you're actually on the site, you're able to right-click on the icon, and it'll provide more information. And it'll tell you the approximated time frame that they're estimating the road to be closed, or what lanes are impacted. Is it the shoulder? Is there some water on the road but it's still passable? Or is it only for emergency operations like emergency responders? But this resource was so valuable in allowing us to check on our system, only for us to check, the people of Texas to be able to check their routes before they left. And I know firsthand, I used this during the event to actually help emergency responders, first responders get themselves, equipment, supplies into the impacted areas, and also to provide comment back to FEMA. We had a FEMA representative that was where I was who was wanting to know if this particular bridge had been damaged, and we were able to log on and check, and it actually had some updates on that. So that's a very, very valuable resource. So if you have never visited it, I highly encourage you to go to it and to check it out. But instead, next slide, please. Okay. In conclusion, we want to keep calm and stay Texas strong. I'm very proud of the men and women that I have the pleasure of working with in the department, because they give their heart. They really do. They give their heart and soul, and everybody lends a helping hand. It doesn't matter what position you are, if you're in maintenance or if you're in the office. When we have a problem, everybody comes together. So it's very, very moving to be part of such a great organization and family. And also for the people of Texas, you know, because I think as a state, everyone pulled together during this difficult time. But I wanted to leave you with a quote that one of our leadership had shared, and I like it. It says, "Leaders are interested in finding the best way rather than having their own way." That being said, does anybody have any questions?
It looks like all that came through the chat.
And I apologize for the technical difficulties we had.
I think we worked through it fairly well. So, but yes, I apologize for those as well. The first question is, what is the NIMS or NIMNS training? I know we saw it back in one of the slides.
It's the National Incident Management System is what it is.
Incident Management System?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Is that available through TxDOT, or how is that
They offer different classes. You can actually Google it. Some of the courses are online where you can you create your login and you can actually take them online, and other classes are offered at a particular location with instructors.
Gotcha. Okay. It's not just within TxDOT then. Okay.
No, ma'am. And this is across the nation, like it's used.
Oh, so it's not specific to our region. Okay. The next question, or the last question that we have so far is, has TxDOT organized the agency to broaden its approach to resiliency from a planning, construction, operation, and not just to emergency response recovery?
One more time for me.
Has TxDOT organized the agency to broaden its approach to resiliency in terms of the planning, design, and construction operations?
I think we already do that. I think we do a good job from the planning aspect all the way through design, construction, and maintenance, of being open-minded and making the necessary adjustments that we need to make. To answer the question, I would say yes. It's not just in emergency operations. I think we look at that all across the board in every aspect of the department.
Was there anything specifically that came out of Harvey, the Harvey event, that led you guys to make a change in maybe operations or design specifically?
No.
Anything you can think of?
Yeah, you know, off the top of my head, I wouldn't have an answer for you. I would have to double check and see what specifically has come out of that.
Okay. There's just one other specific question here, and it says, what solutions, if any, have been identified for radio inoperability?
What's, as far as the areas of improvement that were identified, was looking more into it and making sure from the district standpoint that different radios could coordinate with each other. But I'm not an expert in that area, so I don't want to go into any details of stuff that I don't know anything about. But I know that was an area that was identified, and I'm sure they're looking into it.
So we think it's maybe different models, different distances of operability. Yeah.
I don't think it would be fair for me to make a comment on that when I don't know that, because that information actually was passed along to me from Austin. So.
Understood. Thank you, Amanda. If we didn't have any other questions, I think we'll go into our next highlight. And we have someone else who needs to be muted. We're looking for them now. I'm going to jump over to the San Antonio highlights. Today, actually, we have a membership mixer this evening, March 8th. And then on the March 21st, we'll have our San Pedro Creek Improvement Project luncheon, where we get an update on the project going on downtown. On the 23rd, we'll have a San Pedro Creek tour. And then on April 12th, we'll be hosting our 8th annual awards gala. For any additional information, you're welcome to contact us, or me specifically for San Antonio, or look us up online at WTSinternational.org/San Antonio. And working on they have their members-only coffee and conversation on March 14th. They have a family picnic event on March 23rd, and their April luncheon is April 11th. On May 14th, in the morning, they have a STEM event happening at Denham Junior High. And we'll go ahead and transition into our last speaker of the day. Provide a snapshot of the emergency response evolution. Ms. Sherry LeBeau is an accomplished civil engineer with more than 32 years of experience and a wealth of expertise in transportation and capital improvement programs. Sherry currently serves as the president of Gulf Engineers Consultants, Inc. Prior to joining GEC, Sherry is a well-known figure in the engineering and transportation industry with over 24 years at LA DOT and 6 years at the Division Administration. As the first female secretary of the LA DOT, she was responsible for the administration of the department's Operation and Capital Improvement Program, emergency response for the state's transportation infrastructure. This included an annual budget of $1.7 billion and over 4,200 employees. She has received numerous awards and was inducted into the Louisiana State University Civil and Environmental Engineering Hall of Distinction in 2011, and is a recipient of the Louisiana Engineering Society Charles M. Kerr Award for Public Relations and the American Society of Civil Engineering's Outstanding Civil Engineer Award. Married to William Bill Fernberg, and together they have a daughter-in-law and three granddogs. Welcome, LeBeau.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about emergency response lessons learned here in Louisiana. And Christina, I appreciate you giving me the introduction that you did. And when I look at, and now it's not letting me change the slide. Okay. So when I look at my background, just to let you know, and Christina went through it, but my first introduction to real emergency management here in Louisiana was really during and after Hurricane Katrina. And that was when I was on the process improvement team. And like Dawn was talking about the different climate challenges, we've certainly had our share here. And I always thought Louisiana was number one, but I guess Oklahoma's got that distinct position. But So anyway, so as perspective, the Department of Transportation and Development is responsible for ESF1 and ESF3, and they are the lead agency for those two ESFs. So ESF1 being transportation. And what I wanted to share with y'all today was the evolution of emergency contraflow evacuation in Louisiana. 1998 had Hurricane Georges was threatening the greater New Orleans area. Hundreds of thousands of vehicles created gridlock along I-10 and I-12. Drivers became frustrated because they saw the opposing lanes of traffic were clear and they were just in this line of traffic trying to get out of the New Orleans area. And so that is when the idea for contraflow in Louisiana was born, was after Hurricane Georges. So a team met and they came up with a contraflow plan. In 2004, Hurricane Ivan was threatening our coast. The contraflow plan was put into action. Traffic, it didn't work too well. So that's one of the themes of my presentation is lessons learned. But it was put into action. There was still like 10 to 12 hours to travel from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, which is usually a 90-minute drive. So another task force was initiated after that to try to come up with a new plan from the lessons learned, and another evacuation plan was created. We spent a lot of time coordinating with Mississippi, our neighboring state, and it was hard to get the traffic northern route. So just having the traffic move north instead of some east-west movement, but just more northern route, and really working with Mississippi because that's the need to flow through as we move north. Encouraged and we worked with local entities to talk to the people about having a personal evacuation plan and to leave early and be prepared for delays. So we did a huge public awareness campaign. And unknown to us at this time, we would be encountering Hurricane Katrina the following year. So when Katrina began to threaten our coast, declared an emergency, and we began the contraflow at 4 p.m. And first we implemented our new plan of evacuating people from low-lying areas, and then contraflow continued for 25 hours. It worked very well. Contraflow did, and we were able to get people out of harm's way. So instead of taking that 10 to 12 hours that I discussed in Ivan, it took about 3 hours to travel from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. And we were all happy with the contraflow actions, and we thought, okay, we're going to get through Hurricane Katrina. And then what happened with Katrina were the breaches of the levee in the New Orleans area. And so that's really what created the destruction. And here's the contraflow plan as it stands now. It's on the DOTD website, and as you can see, it involves a lot of it's from the New Orleans area, the northern movement out of South Louisiana. The other ESF function that we have, we're the lead for at DOTD, and I still say we. I think when you work for Department of Transportation so many years, you're always part. You never really leave, even though you might retire. Your heart's still there. But Public Works and responsible for removal. Staff assesses the infrastructure damage immediately after the storm, which is what we've done after storms. So as I stated, after Hurricane Katrina, and you can see this is in the New Orleans area, just Hurricane Katrina, the levee breaches just inundated the city. And this significantly changed the way that Louisiana planned for future emergencies. We set up, not have this in place before Katrina, but when the levee started to breach, a 24-hour call center where we provided emergency information, contact phone numbers, road closure information, and this was my first real involvement with emergency management. I worked in the call center, and it was quite a busy task. And as you can see, this bottom picture is I-10 that connects from New Orleans to Slidell, and the surge came in and just lifted the bridge panels up and then set them back down into the water. So we had quite numerous road closures. So we were quite busy on the phone talking to people, and we even had people from the New Orleans area that were stranded on our rooftop seeking help to be rescued. This job, we got it open very quickly. It was just amazing, but with some acro panels. But we designed it at a higher. There were some questions somebody asked, what are you doing for infrastructure resiliency? And so what we did for this bridge, instead of being 2 lanes each direction, it became lane. It was 100% federal funded, which was a blessing. And we built the bridge higher to get it out of that storm surge in anticipation of future storms. Hurricane Katrina, we secured hotel rooms for our employees that were displaced by the storm. A lot of our employees had lost their homes were flooded. And we also worked with FEMA to set up trailers on DOTD properties to house our employees and other displaced citizens. Here's some actions taken after Katrina. We hired a full-time emergency coordinator. Before Katrina, we had just a person that really worked part-time on emergency. It was just sort of a side job for him at DOTD. But after Katrina, we hired a full-time emergency coordinator. We put contracts in place with a provider of coaches. And, it was really interesting. Dr. Van Sant was talking about the vulnerability of lower-income people and transportation, that they don't have transportation, they don't have cars, and so we have that in our large city, New Orleans, as well. And so we put contracts in place with a provider of coaches to aid in the evacuation. So we had that in place, and then of course, we would do contraflow again in an emergency. We also put agreements in place with the Department of Education for the use of school buses to aid in evacuation. We identified the staging sites for coaches, depending on storm's paths. Just a lot of planning went into this. We worked with parishes to plan evacuee pickup points. We also coordinated with Children and Family Services. They're the ones that have the lead of providing the shelters. And we went ahead and pre-positioned contracts in place for debris removal and monitoring. And then we also made modifications to the contraflow plan. So, at this time, I'm deputy secretary, and I'm now moving into the leadership position where this becomes your responsibility. So Hurricane Gustav started threatening the coast. So the Governor's Office of Homeland Security was activated. Our DOTD Emergency Operations Center was activated. And we put all of these new procedures in place. So the contract for the coaches was activated. And then school buses, we called Department of Education, and there was some question about who's going to drive these school buses. So we worked with the National Guard to be able to drive these school buses. And then, of course, the district personnel were staged with their barricade signs ready for the would be closed after this. Let's see, I went too far. Let me here. Since after Hurricane Gustav, What we did, let's see, did I back up too far? Let me get back. There we go. So lessons learned, we knew that we needed more communication with parish officials. It was really interesting in that we were working hard to get people out of harm's way, and some of the people did not want to board the school buses. They wanted to wait until the coaches arrived. So we had to work with the parish officials to communicate to the citizens that you may have to ride a school bus a short distance, and then we would have coaches that would pick you up at other pickup points to take you a further distance to the shelters. The other thing that we had to manage expectations on is the coach contract. These coaches are coming from all over the country to Louisiana. So it's not like you initiate the coach contract and then all of a sudden 750 coaches show up. And so they come in over, I believe it was like a 72-hour period of time. So you've really got to make a decision early on, which is challenging, as to when you want to engage that coach contract, because it's a very expensive endeavor, as you can imagine. So we really had to work on the expectation of people of when those coaches would arrive, and how many coaches you would have, say, after an hour or 10 hours or 15 hours. So that's why using the school buses was a good idea in the interim, as these coaches were coming in from all over the country. And then we also decided that we had 5 full-time emergency office employees, and then DOTD sort of treated it as people volunteering, and I'm talking about headquarters, not out in our districts. Out in our districts, I mean, these folks they're out there putting barricades up, working hard, just like Amanda was talking about with the Texas DOT people. But we needed more people in our headquarters offering leadership, especially in light of the dispatching of these coaches. So what we did, we said, okay, the executive staff, we're going to assign them to duties. And what we did, we assigned the positions, not the people, because people change, but the positions, relatively stay the same unless you have a reorganization. So we made assignments of our executive leadership to be engaged with day shifts, night shifts. And I believe it was Amanda talked about communication briefs. We had the same issue with people doing reports in different formats, different information. And so after Hurricane Gustav, we put someone, totally in charge of the communications and what the standard communication brief would look like. We also created a governor's office liaison, because the governors wanted to know what was going on all the time, which is perfectly, you would expect that. But what we didn't want is to take people that were actually dispatching coaches or doing emergency operations. So we had a liaison that would gather information or take the calls and answer any questions that the governor's office may have. And then I put one of my executive team leaders as coach oversight, because you need that champion, that leader that is at a higher level in the organization that can really help make quick decisions and take issues to the top leadership to get things done. And then we did a more formalized call center. No more of this, hey, will you volunteer to be in the call center? I mean, this is part of their job. And you can see my last bullet. What we did, we took all of the employee job descriptions, and 5% of everyone's employee job descriptions now talks about emergency management, so that they know coming in that part of their duties may entail working on emergency operations. Again, this is more for our headquarters, the people in the district. That was different. So in 2012, we had Hurricane Isaac threatening our coast. Both emergency, our DOTD Emergency Center was activated, Office of Homeland Security. And so we've learned a lot of lessons now, right? But you can always learn more lessons. So we activated the coach contracts, the school buses were contracts, and for the first time, DOTD was asked to, before we would evacuate people with the coaches prior to the storm's arrival. But Hurricane Isaac was a little different, and it flooded the LaPlace area, which is between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And the coaches were used prior to the hurricane landfall, but also we were asked to dispatch coaches during search and rescue because they had to rescue many people out of the LaPlace area, and we needed some transportation. They didn't, Wildlife and Fish is the lead agency for that, and they didn't want to house people at a shelter. It was so many people that we needed to get some transportation down there to transport them to a shelter. So if you ever use coaches for evacuations, remember that there is a certain mile per hour wind that the coaches will not go out in because they'll be threatened, as you can imagine. They're so tall that the wind would knock them over. So that was a lesson that we learned, that in search and rescue efforts during storms, that having the National Guard, using school buses or other types of vehicles to help with the people that transport the people that were being rescued and get them to the shelter was a better way of doing this. Fortunately, the wind in this case was below the wind level that coaches would go out into a wind condition, and we were able to get coaches there, get the people safely out of there, and get them to a shelter. Hurricane Isaac, this is I-10 here in the LaPlace area, and you can see that I-10 is inundated here. And another, building on the question of resiliency, one thing that we did after this storm was we did end up raising the interstate in here to help mitigate future flooding and making our interstate impassable here in the LaPlace area. Brought a lot of, in the lower left picture is marsh debris up on the roads, and you can see but we had tremendous marsh grass covering the highways that had to be removed. It was quite a mess. And yes, that is there on the interstate. I was seeing how deep the water was and not thinking that there might be snakes or something in the water. That wasn't even on my mind at that time. It should have been. Lessons learned, we needed to be in close communication with search and rescue operations for transportation needs. Before that, we really, we communicated with Wildlife and Fish, but not like we do now for search and rescue operations. One thing that, so I'm secretary by this time with Hurricane Isaac, and one of the things that I saw that we needed, because Hurricane Isaac sort of moved across the state, and we were sending coaches there. There was just a lot of different areas with potential flooding. And so I created a team of staff members, and their job was to watch the storm and brainstorm on potential impacts and actions needed, just trying to stay ahead of what was going on so that we could work to try to anticipate. Also, needed transportation at the shelters, and we had the coaches, and well, that's, to transport one or two people to Walmart or the pharmacy really didn't make sense. So we ended up renting some vehicles from a rental car company to provide transportation at the shelters for people that needed to make convenience runs. And then we were called upon to help with, there were so many people that were eligible for the Disaster Supplemental Assistance Program that we were called upon to provide transportation, actually traffic signing and management at those, what they were called DSNAP sites. So these were, again, this is the first time that we had encountered these types of issues. And so, another lesson learned for future storms so that we could be prepared. So again, the team of staff members assigned, I think that was a good move because it just helps you. So busy as a leader, all of this, that you need that help where people are telling you, hey, there might be something that happens over here. And in fact, there was a potential of a dam breaking in Mississippi where the floodwaters would come down into Louisiana. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but we needed to be prepared for that. So we do flooding issues as well with Mississippi River. Under my watch as secretary, the Morganza spillway was opened for the second time in its history. It was built around in the 1960s. It was opened in 1973 and then 2011. A lot of water from the north, which causes our Mississippi River to flood, and this Morganza spillway, what it does is it diverts water from the Mississippi River to the Atchafalaya Basin. And so here, the picture on the right is where we installed HESCO baskets, just trying to keep our highway open here. That's a bridge that goes across the Mississippi River here to Baton Rouge. So we did have quite a flood in the spring of 2011. Many of you, we actually we have no snowplows in Louisiana, just to let you know, but now it seems like we're getting ice and snow. In fact, this year it snowed in Baton Rouge twice, and I've lived here most of my life, and I can tell you I can count on maybe one hand. I might need to use a couple of fingers on my other hand, but it really does not snow down here in Baton Rouge. But we did have an ice storm in 2015 that just crippled us down here in southern Louisiana. We had to close our interstates because most of our interstates are elevated. They go over water. We have a lot of water here in Louisiana. But we did have 2 snowstorms. Or snow, I guess maybe for me a snowstorm may be different than what you envision a snowstorm to be, but we did have 2 snow instances here down in Baton Rouge just this year. So there were closures of the interstate this year as well. My tips for emergency management, and again, this is just from my standpoint of being the lead on this for DOTD for 6 years. Administrations are judged by their leadership and success of emergency preparedness and management. And I served under Governor Jindal, and one of his main focus points was emergency preparedness and management. So we really, after Katrina, did in this area of emergency preparedness and management. Comprehensive emergency operations plan. But it's not just a book you put on the desk. I mean, you and your staff need to know the plan. And what I did as a leader every year, we had tabletop emergency exercises with the staff with anticipation of what if this happens, what if this happens, and, you know, hurricanes with the H hours, and understanding when we would be making recommendations to the governor to initiate the coach contract and say, hey, we need to, you know, start evacuation procedures. And then it's understanding the difference between emergency planners and those who are experienced in operations and the collaboration that is needed between the two. That was one of what I learned. You could go and, again, have the operations plan, but you have people who are planners and do a great job with that, and then you have the people that actually carry out the operations. And sometimes, you know, I go into flexibility. Sometimes you can have the best laid plans, but you've got to have flexibility, and you've got to have understanding as to, you know, how the operations really work. And what I mean by that, like the coach contract, the drivers, you have to understand that they can only drive so many hours, and it takes them so many hours to get down to Louisiana, and then they, you know, have so many hours that they can't drive. So you know, just understanding how all that works together. in Louisiana, we engage staff by assigning them to defined roles. So DOTD just hired a new chief engineer, and he knows that his responsibility is now to man the night shift at the DOTD EOC. So tying those emergency responsibilities to specific job positions, not to people. Understanding the roles and responsibilities from the local level to the governor and remain flexible. You know, we talk about here in Louisiana that it starts at the parish level, and then when they need assistance, they contact the state for assistance. Communication, just everyone staying in communication with each other through emergencies, and then managing the expectations of leaders and citizens. For instance, during the ice storm, we worked really hard to try to keep I-12 open, but we ended up having to close I-12 and to be able to explain why and what, and having an established detour route around that area for people to travel on. I retired from the state in January 2016 after managing emergencies in a leadership position at the Department of Transportation. I experienced a personal experience soon after I retired. It was in August of 2016, and it was very, very humbling for me because I'd always been on the other side, emergency management with the Department of Transportation, and now I had a situation where a town called Denham Springs, pretty much 90% of the city went underwater, and my sister lived there, and her house became flooded. She didn't think it would. That area had never flooded before. All of a sudden, I'm getting calls from her that she is stranded on the street behind the house, and she can't get out. I mean, she's stuck there, and I even see her on TV, that bottom picture. I'm watching TV, the news, and there she is with my niece who was rescued from another house by boat, and that was their reunion out on the highway. So, the impact that these emergencies have on our citizens and all just, makes me afraid. Not that I didn't before, I certainly did, but to appreciate the hard work of the DOTD and everyone that is working so hard to mitigate these devastating storms for our citizens. So I have a quote as well, and that is from Albert Einstein: "The only mistake in life is the lesson not learned." And in Louisiana, we love our state and our natural resources, and we want to keep these for future generations, and it's crawfish season, so I thought I'd inspire you with a little picture of some crawfish here. But what we're doing in Louisiana, we have a lot of work going on in our coastal area. We have a group that was created actually after Katrina called the Coastal Protection Restoration Authority. And so we are working hard here to make our state more resilient to these natural disasters that are occurring, because they do seem to be coming more frequently. And so here at GEC, I look at GEC now, and we are working on a major diversion project here. And again, like I said, we have a lot of efforts going on in the state to make our state more resilient. So I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I'm open to any questions if there are any. So I'm going to pass this on back to you, Christina.
All right, thank you, Sherry. I think you did a wonderful job of bringing back all of the presentations collectively today. And we've just seen so many different perspectives on what happens and how the natural disasters impact our people and their transportation. Even down to, we're a region, we're not just individual states, but in terms of transportation, we're all interconnected, and we're moving back and forth usually easily, but depending on what kind of what kind of events are happening in each area. Let's see here. I did have one question here for you. Is if there was one particular natural disaster that you witnessed that is just part of you. It's something you witnessed personally as I guess maybe the most impactful.
Hands down, Hurricane Katrina. That was the devastation. I know it was on the news and all, but until you rode around and saw the devastation firsthand in South Louisiana and then extending over into Mississippi, I've never witnessed that vast of devastation in my life, and the number of displaced people, it was just incredible. Definitely has been a life changer for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I cannot imagine. If we did not have any other questions, I'd like to go ahead and wrap up now. It looks like we're right at our closing time. Thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you for your time and your expertise. Hopefully those listening and participating in the webinar know that you are wonderful connections to getting additional information and maybe even growing their own transportation needs and resources in their areas. So please go online to the nearest chapter, get registered or subscribe to our newsletters and what we've got going on in your area. I'm going to go ahead and close out and just say we will be making $50 donations in the name of each of our speakers today to a charity of their choice. We definitely like to say a thank you to LAN as they've hosted our event on WebEx today. We hope you've enjoyed the presentation. We appreciate your participation. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but happy International Women's Day. Thanks for all of your time and have a wonderful